The transport ship arrived 3 hours too late. Captain James Rodriguez stood on the bridge, staring at the screen showing what remained of New Harvest Colony. Smoke rose from every structure. The agricultural domes were shattered, their transparent panels scattered like broken glass across the red soil. Bodies lay in the streets, in the fields, in their homes. 47,000 people had lived on New Harvest yesterday. Today, there were none. "Sir, we're getting the same reports from Prosperity Station in Green Valley," his communications officer said, her voice shaking. "Both colonies are gone. Total casualties estimated at 47,312. Rodriguez closed his eyes. 47,000. Farmers, teachers, children, doctors, engineers. People who had traveled across the stars to grow food and build new lives. All dead. Who did this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Kaldrex hegemony forces, sir. They jumped in with a battle fleet, bombed from orbit, then sent ground forces to finish anyone who survived the initial attack. It was systematic, planned." Rodriguez opened his eyes and looked at the planet below. New Harvest had been his wife's dream. She had planned to retire there, to finally see real sky and grow real food after 30 years in space. Now it was a graveyard. "Get me a channel to Earth," he said. "Command needs to see this." The message reached Earth 3 days later. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the footage in her office at Fleet Command headquarters. She had seen combat before, had lost friends and colleagues in skirmishes with pirates and territorial disputes. But this was different. This was murder on a massive scale. "They used plasma weapons on civilian shelters," her intelligence officer explained, pointing at the data. "The Kaldrex knew exactly where people were hiding. They hunted them down deliberately." Chen felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What's the Concordance saying?" "Ambassador Webb is presenting our case now. He's demanding immediate action." Chen pulled up the live feed from the Galactic Concordance Chamber. The vast hall was filled with representatives from 200 species, each seated in their species-specific environments. Humans occupied a small section near the back, relative newcomers to this ancient institution. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood at the speaker's platform. He was a career diplomat, gray-haired and normally calm. Today, his face was red with barely contained rage. 47,000 civilians, Webb said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Not soldiers, not combatants, farmers, children. They grew food. They taught school. They lived peaceful lives, and the Kaldrex hegemony slaughtered them without warning, without mercy, without cause." A Kaldrex representative rose from its seat. The species looked like massive crustaceans, their shells gleaming under the chamber lights. When it spoke, its translator rendered the clicks and whistles into galactic standard language. "The colonies were built on disputed territory," the Kaldrex said calmly. "We filed proper territorial claims 200 cycles ago. Humans ignored these claims. We were within our rights to reclaim our space." Webb stared at the alien in disbelief. "Your territorial claim gives you the right to murder children?" "The deaths were unfortunate but necessary. Humans should have evacuated when warned." "There was no warning," Webb shouted. "Your fleet appeared and started firing immediately." The Concordance Arbiter, a floating crystalline being that served as judge, made a sound like wind chimes. "Ambassador Webb, please control yourself. Such emotional displays are inappropriate in this chamber." Webb took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "Arbiter, I formally request Concordance military intervention against the Kaldrex hegemony for violation of the Protection of Civilians Accord." The Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Around the chamber, representatives whispered to each other. "The Concordance has reviewed the Kaldrex territorial claims," the Arbiter finally said. "They are legitimate under historical precedent laws. While the loss of life is regrettable, the Kaldrex acted within their legal rights. No intervention will be authorized." Webb felt the words like a physical blow. Legal rights? They committed genocide. They reclaimed territory. The civilian deaths, while tragic, were a consequence of human trespassing. The Concordance will not intervene in legitimate territorial disputes. This matter is closed. Webb stood frozen at the platform. Around him, other representatives were already moving on to the next topic, something about trade regulations. His people had been massacred, and the galaxy's response was to call it a property dispute. He returned to the human section where his staff waited. A young aide named Sarah Martinez looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir?" "What do we do now?" Webb looked back at the Concordance chamber. at the hundreds of species who had just dismissed human lives as irrelevant. 80 years ago, humanity had joined this institution filled with hope, believing they were entering a civilized community of species who valued peace and justice. They had been wrong. "Get me a secure line to President Volkov," Webb said quietly. "Tell her we need to talk. Tell her the concordance has failed us." On Earth, President Elena Volkov sat in her office and watched the concordance proceedings. She had been president for 6 years, had guided humanity through first contact, through the integration into galactic society, through the awkward years of learning alien customs and protocols. She had believed in the dream of a peaceful galaxy. Now she watched 47,000 of her people dismissed as acceptable casualties in a property dispute. Her chief of staff entered the office. "Madam President, the calls are flooding in. Every news network, every government representative, they all want a statement." "What are people saying?" Volkov asked. "They're angry. Very angry. There are protests in every major city. People are demanding action." Volkov turned away from the screen and looked out her window at the city below. Geneva had been the seat of human unity for over a century, the place where nations came together to speak as one species. That unity had brought them to the stars. That unity had made them vulnerable. "Get me Admiral Chen," she said, "and the Joint Chiefs, and every intelligence director we have. I want to know exactly what our military capabilities are. Madam President, we're bound by the Concordance Treaty restrictions. Our military is limited to defensive forces and—" "I know what the treaty says," Volkov interrupted. "I also know those restrictions were never mandatory. We accepted them voluntarily to appear peaceful, to be good galactic citizens." She turned back to face her chief of staff. "That experiment just ended. The Concordance made it clear that being civilized makes us targets, so we're going to stop being civilized." Her chief of staff stared at her. "Ma'am, humanity survived 10,000 years of killing each other before we reached the stars. We know how to wage war. We're very, very good at it. We just chose not to." Volkov's voice was cold now, emptied of emotion. "The Caldrex and the Concordance just reminded us why we learned those skills in the first place. They're about to learn what humans are like when we stop pretending to be something we're not." She pulled up her communication system and began composing a message. "Not to the Concordance, not to the Caldrex. To every human colony, every ship, every outpost across human space. 47,000 of our people are dead," she would tell them. "And the galaxy calls it legal. So we're going to teach them a lesson our ancestors learned the hard way. There's a difference between law and justice, and when law fails, humans make their own justice." The message would go out within the hour. The galaxy would receive it shortly after, and nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Concordance Chamber fell silent when President Elena Volkov's image appeared on the main display. This was unusual. National leaders rarely addressed the Concordance directly. They sent ambassadors for that purpose. But Volkov had requested emergency speaking time, and the arbiter had granted it. She stood behind a podium on Earth wearing a simple black suit. Behind her, displayed on screens, were the names of the dead. All 47,312 of them. The text scrolled slowly, a constant reminder. "Members of the Concordance," Volkov began, her voice steady. "3 weeks ago I watched you dismiss the murder of my people as a property dispute. I watched you invoke ancient laws and historical precedents to justify genocide. I watched you teach humanity a valuable lesson about how this galaxy really works." Around the chamber, representatives shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Webb sat in the human section, his face carefully neutral. He had helped write this speech. He knew what was coming. "You've known humanity for 80 years, Volkov continued. "In that time, we've been model citizens. We've followed your laws, respected your customs, limited our military as you requested. We did everything possible to fit into your civilized society." She paused. "But I realize now that we never told you who we really are. So let me correct that mistake." She pressed a control and the screens behind her changed. Now they showed Earth. Not the gleaming cities and peaceful farms, but something else. Images from humanity's past. "This is Earth 500 years ago," Volkov said. "We call this period World War II. In 6 years, humans killed over 70 million of each other. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We built factories whose only purpose was murder. We committed atrocities that still haunt our collective memory." The images changed again. More wars, more weapons, More death. This is World War I, 20 million dead in 4 years. We used poison gas on each other. We shot our own soldiers for refusing to run into machine gun fire. We invented tanks, aircraft combat, and submarine warfare. Another change. Medieval battles, ancient sieges, tribal warfare. For 10,000 years before we reached space, humans were in nearly constant conflict. We fought over territory, resources, religion, politics, and sometimes just because we didn't like each other. We built weapons from stone, bronze, iron, steel, and eventually atoms. We wrote books about war strategy. We made killing each other into an art form. In the concordance chamber, a small alien species called the Prixil began accessing human historical databases. Their researcher had been curious about human evolution. Now, watching the presentation, he dug deeper into the records. What he found made his primary hearts beat faster. They fought each other for 10,000 years. His supervisor whispered over their private channel. How did they survive? That's not the disturbing part, the researcher replied, pulling up more data. Look at the casualty counts. Look at how fast they recovered. After wars that killed tens of millions, they rebuilt in decades and started fighting again. They kept getting better at it. On the main display, Volkov was still speaking. We bombed our own cities. We poisoned our own water. We created diseases to use against each other. We split atoms and harnessed the power of stars specifically to make weapons. And through it all, we survived. We adapted. We learned. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. Then we reached the stars and found you. A galaxy full of ancient species with rules and laws and civilized behavior. And we thought, maybe we don't have to be what we were. Maybe we can be better. So we tried. For 80 years, we tried your way. The images behind her changed back to the burning colonies. This is what your civilization gave us. 47,000 dead because we trusted in your laws. 47,000 dead because we believed the concordance would protect us. 47,000 dead because we stopped being what we are. Around the chamber, more species were accessing human databases now. A Viridian diplomat watched footage of the Normandy invasion and felt physically ill. Thousands of humans running into gunfire, climbing over the bodies of their friends to keep attacking. Another watched video of nuclear testing and calculated the yield. Weapons powerful enough to shatter continents, and humans had built thousands of them. You've mistaken our restraint for weakness, Volkov said. You've mistaken our desire for peace as inability to wage war. Let me be clear. Humanity knows how to fight. We are terrifyingly good at it. We just chose not to, out of respect for your civilization. She straightened, and when she spoke again, her voice was ice. As of today, humanity formally withdraws from all military limitation clauses of the Concordance Treaty. We remain members of the Concordance for trade and diplomatic purposes, but we will no longer accept restrictions on our defensive capabilities. We will no longer rely on Concordance justice to protect our people. The Kaldrek's representative rose from its seat. You cannot threaten the hegemony. We are a major power. We have— Sit down, Volkov said simply. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm explaining reality. You killed 47,000 humans because you thought you could. Because you thought we were weak. Because you thought the Concordance would protect you from consequences. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You were wrong on all 3 counts. The Kaldrek's hegemony will answer for what they've done. Not in this chamber under these laws that failed us, but under the oldest law in the universe, the law of consequences. You murdered our people. Now you'll learn what humans do to those who hurt us. The arbiter made its wind chime sound, sharp and angry. President Volkov, you cannot declare war in this chamber. The Concordance forbids— I'm not declaring war, Volkov interrupted. I'm declaring that we're done pretending to be something we're not. What happens next is between humanity and the Kaldreks. The Concordance made it clear you won't interfere in territorial disputes. Her smile widened. We're about to have a territorial dispute. Ambassador Webb stood and walked to the exit. The other human representatives followed him. As they left, Volkov delivered her final message. To the species of this galaxy, humanity wanted to be your friends. We wanted to be civilized, peaceful, and cooperative. The Kaldreks and this Concordance just taught us that civilization is a luxury only the strong can afford. So we're going to be strong. We're going to remember what we are beneath the polish and the politics. The screens behind her changed one last time, showing a human soldier from ancient times, scarred, exhausted, but still standing. We're survivors. We crawled out of caves and built cities. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times and came back stronger. We turned our own world into a paradise after using it as a battlefield for millennia, and now we're going to show you what that means. The transmission ended. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species demanded immediate action against humanity. Others sat in shocked silence, processing what they'd just heard. The Caldrex representative was clicking angrily, demanding concordance protection. In the human section, now empty except for one junior aide, a message came through on the secure channel. It was from Admiral Chen, broadcasting to every human ship and colony. Fleet mobilization begins immediately. All restrictions lifted. War protocols activated. Time to show them who we are. Across the galaxy, humans who had been farmers and traders and teachers received their messages. They went to storage facilities they'd hoped never to open. They pulled out weapons and armor that had been packed away as relics of a barbaric past. They remembered training they'd done just in case, training they'd thought would never be needed. In the concordance chamber, the Prixil researcher finally finished reviewing human history. He turned to his supervisor, his small body trembling. "We made a terrible mistake," he said quietly. "All of us. We thought they were like us, that they'd evolved past violence. But they didn't evolve past it. They chose to set it aside, and we just gave them a reason to pick it back up." On Earth, President Volkov watched the concordance feed for a moment longer, then turned it off. She had one more call to make. Admiral Chen answered immediately. "Madam President, the fleet will be ready to move in 3 months." "Make it 2, Volkov said. "And Admiral?" "No mercy, no restraint. Show them what humans look like when we stop being civilized." "Yes, ma'am. It will be my pleasure." The call ended. Volkov sat alone in her office, looking at the names still scrolling on her screen. 47,312 names. She had memorized everyone. "You wanted our territory," she whispered to the absent Caldrex. "Now you'll learn what it cost to take it from us." Outside, the sun was setting over Geneva, but across human space, in shipyards and factories and training facilities, a different kind of sun was rising. The fires of industry, of preparation, of controlled fury. Humanity was going to war, and the galaxy was about to remember why civilizations fear the dark. The shipyard above Earth had been quiet for decades, built during humanity's expansion into space. It primarily constructed colony ships and cargo haulers now, peaceful vessels for peaceful times. That changed overnight. Commander Liu Wei stood in the observation deck and watched as construction crews swarmed over the facility. New sections were being added. Old sections were being retrofitted. The shipyard was growing before his eyes. "How long until we're at full military production?" Admiral Chen asked over the communication link. 6 weeks, ma'am, Liu replied. "We're pulling workers from every civilian project. The Mars yards are already online. Luna Station will be ready in 3 weeks." "Not fast enough," Chen said. "We need ships now." "With respect, Admiral, we're already breaking every speed record in existence. But we can't build warships the same way we build colony ships. The armor alone—" "I've seen your designs," Chen interrupted. "They're too fancy. Strip them down. I don't need elegant ships. I need ships that can fight and keep fighting." Liu pulled up his design screens. "Admiral, these designs are already simplified compared to Concordance standard warships. If we reduce complexity further, good, reduce it. I want ships that a crew can repair with basic tools and spare parts. I want redundant systems. I want vessels that can take damage and not die." Liu thought about that. He looked at his designs with new eyes. Concordance warships were beautiful, efficient machines. Each system perfectly integrated, elegant in their complexity. But elegant meant fragile. Integrated meant a single failure could cascade through the whole ship. "You want warships built like the old naval vessels," Liu said slowly. "Compartmentalized, simple, tough." "Exactly. Our ancestors built ships from steel that could take torpedo hits and keep sailing. Build me the space version of that." Liu began modifying his designs. He removed the elegant curves, the streamlined profiles. He added armor, thick and heavy. He separated systems so damage to one wouldn't affect others. He added backup systems, then backups for the backups. The ships became blocky, ugly things, but they would be nearly impossible to kill. "These won't be pretty," he warned. "I don't need pretty," Chen replied. "I need functional." "How many can you build?" Liu ran calculations. "With full industrial conversion, maybe 200 capital ships in 6 months. 400 smaller vessels." There was silence on the line. Then Chen laughed, actually laughed. "Commander, the Caldrex have 800 capital ships total. built over 2 centuries. You're telling me we can build a quarter of that in 6 months? Yes, ma'am. Humans are really good at mass production when we want to be. We learned that skill during our world wars. Then do it. And Commander, don't stop at 6 months. Keep building. I want 1,000 ships within a year. The call ended. Liu looked at his teams, at the shipyard expanding around him, at the industrial capacity of an entire species turning toward a single purpose. They could do this. Humanity had always been good at building things. They were about to remember how good. On Mars, the factories that built terraforming equipment shut down. Engineers retooled the assembly lines. Within weeks, they were producing weapons instead. Plasma cannons, missile systems, point defense arrays. The equipment wasn't as sophisticated as concordant standard weapons, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to work. Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in her laboratory on Luna Station, looking at the device on her workbench. It was a missile guidance system, something that had been theoretical until last month. Now it was real. This violates about 6 different concordance weapons treaties, her assistant said nervously. We're not bound by those treaties anymore, Martinez replied. They made that clear when they let our people die. But this is a kinetic kill weapon. The treaty bans those specifically because they're too destructive. Martinez looked at her assistant. The Caldrex used plasma weapons on civilian shelters. They hunted down children. And you're worried about a treaty? The assistant was quiet. Besides, Martinez continued, the treaty banned them as inhumane. But you know what else is inhumane? Genocide. So we're going to use every weapon we can think of. If the galaxy doesn't like it, they should have protected us when we asked. She packaged the guidance system and sent it to manufacturing. It would be in production by next week. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Weapons designers pulled out old files, concepts that had been shelved as too aggressive for a peaceful species. They dusted them off and put them into production. Nuclear-pumped lasers, relativistic kill missiles, autonomous hunter drones. Weapons that had been deemed uncivilized were now deemed necessary. A concordance observer named Telrix had been assigned to monitor human military buildup. It was standard procedure when a species withdrew from military limitation treaties. Telrix was supposed to report on potential threats. What he found terrified him. He sent his first report to the Concordance 3 weeks after humanity's withdrawal. Human industrial capacity far exceeds estimates, he wrote. They've converted 70% of civilian production to military purposes in less than 1 month. Shipyard construction has increased by 400%. Weapons production is unprecedented. He attached data files, numbers that seemed impossible. A species building warships faster than most species could build cargo haulers. His supervisor sent back a message. Check your calculations. These numbers cannot be correct. Telrix double-checked, then triple-checked. The numbers were correct. Humans have been building things for 10,000 years, he replied. They've gotten very efficient at it. During their World War II, they produced over 300,000 aircraft in 4 years. They built entire fleets of warships in months. This is what they do when threatened. He sent another report a month later. Human warship design philosophy is concerning. Their vessels lack elegance but possess extreme durability. Test data suggests their ships can continue fighting with up to 60% hull breaches. They've compartmentalized every system. Destroyed 1 reactor, 3 backups activate. Breach the hull, automated systems seal it. Kill the crew in one section. The rest of the ship keeps fighting. He paused, then added a personal note. These are not ships designed for quick battles. These are ships designed for wars of attrition. Ships built by a species that expects to be hurt but refuses to die. His third report was the most disturbing. Human weapons systems show a fundamental philosophical difference from Concordance military technology. We build weapons to disable ships to achieve victory with minimal loss of life. Human weapons are designed to kill. Their missiles don't just penetrate hulls, they detonate inside to maximize damage. Their cannons don't just breach armor. They fragment it into shrapnel that destroys internal systems. Every weapon system asks the same question. How do we make this more lethal? Telrix watched a test firing of a human railgun. The projectile moved so fast it was invisible. It hit the target asteroid and simply erased it, turned solid rock into expanding debris. They used to use these on each other, he whispered to himself, on their own species. In the Concordance chamber, his reports were read and dismissed. The Arbiter declared that humanity was within their rights to build defensive forces. Several species, including the Caldrex, laughed at the idea of human ships threatening anyone. They looked at images of the blocky, ugly vessels and saw primitive technology. They didn't see what Telric saw. They didn't understand what those designs meant. Admiral Chen stood in her new flagship's command center. The ship was called Retribution because she believed in clear communication. It wasn't the fastest ship. It wasn't the prettiest. But it was the toughest thing humanity had ever built. All systems green, her first officer reported. Fleet reports ready status. 200 capital ships, 400 support vessels. Another 100 ships will be ready next month. Chen looked at the tactical display. 600 ships where 6 months ago they'd had barely 50 patrol vessels. She thought about the Caldrex, about their ancient fleet of 800 ships that had been built slowly over centuries. "What's our current location?" she asked. "Earth orbit, ma'am. Set course for Caldrex space. Maximum speed." "Ma'am, shouldn't we wait for the rest of the fleet?" Chen shook her head. "They can catch up. I've waited long enough. It's time to collect the debt." The fleet began moving, hundreds of ships accelerating away from Earth. On the hull of each vessel, painted in white letters, were the names of the dead colonies: New Harvest, Prosperity Station, Green Valley. And below them a count 47312. They weren't just ships. They were memorials. They were messages. They were promises. Back in his observation post, Telrix watched the human fleet depart. He sent one final report to the Concordance. "The humans are coming. They've built a fleet in 6 months that rivals major powers who've been building for centuries. Their ships are designed for sustained combat. Their weapons are designed for maximum destruction, and they're angry." He paused, considering his next words carefully. The Concordance dismissed them as primitive. The Caldrex dismissed them as weak. Everyone assumed that because humans wanted peace, they couldn't wage war. We were all catastrophically wrong. These are the same humans who fought themselves for 10,000 years. The same humans who built weapons powerful enough to destroy their own world. They just stopped using those skills. Now they've remembered. He sent the report and sat back, while the Caldrex First Defense Fleet detected the human ships 3 hours before they arrived. Fleet Commander Vraxis reviewed the sensor data with what passed for amusement among his species. 600 human vessels approaching in loose formation. Primitive, blocky ships that looked like cargo haulers with guns attached. "They're bringing their entire fleet," his tactical officer reported. "Should we alert second and third fleet?" Vraxis made a clicking sound that indicated negative. 600 ships against our 800? Let them come. We'll crush this upstart species and teach the galaxy what happens when primitives challenge their betters. The Caldrex fleet moved to intercept. They formed elegant battle formations, perfected over centuries of warfare. Each ship knew its position, its role, its function. It was beautiful, really. A dance of destruction. The human fleet didn't form any recognizable pattern. They just kept coming, spread across a wide front, disorganized, chaotic. They don't even know how to fight. Vraxis clicked in satisfaction. Prepare to fire. Target their command ships first. The Caldrex opened fire at maximum range. Plasma bolts and energy beams crossed the distance between fleets. Several hit human vessels. The humans didn't even try to dodge. Damage reports? Vraxis asked. Minimal, Commander. Their armor is surprisingly thick. Weapons had little effect. Vraxis felt a flicker of concern. Increased power. All weapons, maximum output. The Caldrex fleet fired again. This time the weapons burned through armor, breached hulls. 3 human ships took critical damage. Vraxis waited for them to fall back or explode. They kept coming. Commander, those 3 ships are still fighting. Their weapons are still active. How? We breached their hulls. They should be dead. On board the damaged human vessel Defiant, Captain James Chen surveyed his ship's status. Sections 3 through 7 were open to space. 14 crew members dead. 2 engines offline. But the ship's main systems were intact, protected by internal bulkheads and redundant power systems. Engineering, can we keep fighting? Yes, sir. We've sealed the breaches. We're down to 60% capacity, but we're operational. Chen smiled grimly. This was exactly what the ships were designed for. Take damage, keep fighting. All weapons, target that Caldrex cruiser. Fire everything we have, the Defiant's railguns spoke. Solid projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed crossed the distance in seconds. They punched through the Caldrex cruiser's shields like they weren't there. The cruiser's elegant armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, did nothing against solid metal moving at impossible speeds. The projectiles went through the ship's entire length and came out the other side. The cruiser broke apart, its compartmentalized systems catastrophically failing as the internal structure shattered. Target destroyed, the weapons officer reported. Acquiring next target. Across the battlefield, Vraxis watched in horror as human weapons tore through his fleet. The humans weren't using energy weapons. They were using kinetic weapons, mass drivers, railguns, primitive technology that nobody had used in warfare for centuries because energy weapons were more efficient, more civilized. But kinetic weapons didn't care about shields. They didn't care about energy-resistant armor. They were just metal moving very, very fast, and fast-moving metal destroyed everything it touched. Evasive maneuvers, Vraxis ordered. All ships, maximum speed. The Kaldrex fleet began to scatter, but the human fleet didn't chase them. Instead, they broke into smaller groups and began targeting supply lines and communication relays. Admiral Chen watched the battle from Retribution's command center. The Kaldrex were running just as she'd expected. They'd won a few skirmishes over the centuries, but they'd never fought a real war. They didn't understand what war actually meant. Don't pursue the fleet, she ordered. Target their infrastructure. I want every supply depot, every fuel station, every repair facility destroyed. Cut them off. Ma'am, that will take months. Good. Let them watch. Let them see what's coming. The human fleet spread across Kaldrex space like a plague. They didn't fight big battles. They fought small ones constantly. A supply convoy here, a communication station there. They used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, tricks that warfare historians would have recognized from Earth's ancient conflicts. The Kaldrex tried to respond, but found themselves fighting ghosts. Human ships would appear, attack, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. They used every advantage they could find. They hacked communication systems, broadcasting the names of the dead colonists on every frequency. They used psychological warfare, letting Kaldrex crews watch videos of what their people had done to human civilians. Commander Vraxis found himself unable to sleep. When he did sleep, he heard the names. 47,312 names, repeated endlessly on every channel. 3 weeks into the conflict, the Kaldrex tried a counterattack. They massed 300 ships and attacked a human mining operation. It was a trap. The human ships at the mining operation were bait. When the Kaldrex fleet committed to the attack, they found themselves surrounded by human reinforcements that had been hiding in the system's asteroid field. The battle was brutal and short. Captain Maria Rodriguez commanded one of the ambushing vessels. She watched the Kaldrex fleet realize their mistake, watched them try to escape. She remembered New Harvest, the colony her wife had dreamed about. She remembered seeing the bodies. No mercy, she said quietly. They gave none. They get none. Her fleet tore into the Kaldrex ships. They didn't just disable them. They destroyed them. Completely. Utterly. When the battle ended, 300 Kaldrex ships had become debris fields. The Concordant sent an emergency message to the human fleet. The Arbiter itself made the call. Admiral Chen, you must cease these attacks immediately. The Kaldrex have requested Concordance mediation. You're violating... We left your Concordance, Chen interrupted. We're not bound by your rules anymore. But the level of destruction is a fraction of what they did to our colonies. 47,000 civilians. Tell me, Arbiter, how many Kaldrex civilians have died? There was silence. None, Chen continued. Because we're only targeting military assets. We're fighting a war. They committed genocide. Don't talk to me about destruction. The Concordance demands. Chen ended the call. The war continued. The Kaldrex grew desperate. They tried massing their entire fleet for one decisive battle. The humans refused to engage. Instead, they attacked Kaldrex home space, destroying orbital facilities and industrial centers. Not the planets themselves, just the infrastructure. The Kaldrex fleet rushed home to defend their core worlds. The humans vanished, appearing in a different sector to attack supply lines again. It was maddening. The Kaldrex couldn't pin down the human fleet long enough to destroy it. They're not fighting like a civilized species, Vraxis complained to his superiors. They use ambushes, false surrenders, psychological attacks. They don't follow any rules. They told us they would stop being civilized, one of his superiors replied quietly. We didn't believe them. The final blow came 3 months into the conflict. A human commando team infiltrated Kaldros Prime, the Kaldrex homeworld. They didn't attack cities or kill civilians. Instead, they placed charges on every planetary shield generator simultaneously. When the charges detonated, Kaldros Prime's defenses went dark. For 6 hours, the planet was defenseless. The human fleet jumped into orbit and simply waited. They didn't fire a single shot. They just broadcasted a message. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your planet is defenseless. We could destroy it right now. We could kill billions of your people the way you killed 47,000 of ours. But we won't because we're not like you. We don't murder civilians. The message continued. Your fleet is scattered. Your infrastructure is destroyed. Your military capacity is down to 40%. You've lost this war, but you can still save your people. Surrender now. Face justice for what you did, and your civilians will be spared. Refuse, and we'll continue this war until there's nothing left of your military. The choice is yours. You have 24 hours. Across Kaldros Prime, millions of Kaldreks watched the human fleet in orbit. They had seen the footage from New Harvest. They knew what humans were capable of when they stopped being civilized, and they realized that the humans were showing more mercy than the Kaldreks had shown them. Commander Vraxis sat in his command center, looking at tactical displays showing the remains of his once mighty fleet. 800 ships had become 350. Supply lines were shattered. Morale was gone, and the humans weren't even trying their hardest. They could have done so much worse. He had called humans primitive, weak, uncivilized. He had been wrong on all counts. Contact the human fleet, he told his communications officer. Tell them we surrender. 24 hours later, the Kaldreks hegemony formally surrendered to humanity. The terms were harsh: reparations. 6 months after the Kaldreks' surrender, Ambassador Marcus Webb walked through the rebuilt New Harvest colony. The buildings were new, constructed from materials mined from the Kaldreks' reparations. The agricultural domes gleamed in the sunlight. Children played in the streets, their laughter carrying on the wind. But in the center of the colony stood a memorial. 47,312 names carved into black stone. Webb stopped in front of it, as he always did when he visited. He ran his fingers across the names, feeling the letters etched deep into the rock. "We remember," he whispered. Behind him, a young girl approached. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She placed flowers at the base of the memorial. "My aunt's name is here," she said quietly. "I never met her. She died before I was born." Webb knelt down beside her. "What was her name?" "Sarah Martinez. She was a teacher." Webb found the name on the stone. He remembered reading her file. 26 years old. Had taught elementary school. Had dreams of opening a library. Had died in her classroom trying to shield her students. "She was brave," Webb said. The girl nodded. "My mom says we should never forget. That's why they built this place exactly where the old colony was. So we remember what happened when we trusted others to protect us." Webb stood looking at the memorial, at the colony beyond it, at the military garrison on the hill. 200 human soldiers, a permanent presence, armed and ready. A reminder to the Kaldreks and to humanity itself. Never again. "Your mom is right," Webb said. "We should never forget." The girl ran off to join her friends. Webb watched her go. Watched the children play in a place where children had died. Life continuing despite tragedy. That was humanity's greatest strength, really. The ability to rebuild, to move forward, to survive. His communication device beeped. A message from Earth. President Volkov wanted to speak with him before he returned to the concordance chamber. The holographic call connected. Volkov looked older than she had 6 months ago. The war had aged her, even though it had been relatively short by historical standards. "Ambassador Webb," she said, "I wanted to brief you before tomorrow's session. The concordance is voting on new military limitation treaties. They want to restrict us again. 40 species have signed a petition demanding humanity accept new limits. They're afraid of us now." Webb wasn't surprised. The war had shown the galaxy what humans could do. It had shattered the comfortable assumption that ancient species were inherently superior to young ones. Now everyone was scrambling to figure out how to deal with humanity. "What's your position, Madam President?" Volkov was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to be the species everyone fears, but I also won't go back to being defenseless. We tried that. It got 47,000 of our people killed. So what do? We offer a compromise. We'll accept some restrictions, but only if they're universal. If every species agrees to the same limits we do. No special rules for ancient powers. No exemptions for concordance founders. Everyone plays by the same rules, or we don't play at all." Webb thought about that. It was a smart move. Most of the major powers would never agree to limit their own militaries, which meant the vote would fail and humanity would have the moral high ground for refusing. And if they actually agree, he asked, then we have a truly equal galaxy, which is what we wanted all along. The call ended. Webb spent the night reviewing his speech for the next day. He thought about what to say, how to say it, how to balance humanity's right to defend itself with the galaxy's fear of what they'd become. The concordance chamber was packed the next day. Every species had sent representatives. Even minor species that rarely attended were present. Everyone wanted to see what humanity would do. Webb stood at the speaker's platform. The Arbiter floated nearby, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. The concordance recognizes Ambassador Webb of humanity, the Arbiter chimed. Webb looked around the chamber. Some faces were hostile, some were afraid, some were thoughtful. He saw the Caldrex section, much smaller now, their representative hunched and defeated. 6 months ago, Webb began, I stood in this chamber and begged for justice. I showed you the bodies of our dead and asked for help. You refused. You called it a property dispute and moved on. The chamber was silent. Today you want to talk about restrictions, about limits, about controlling the dangerous humans who dared to defend themselves. He paused. So let me be clear about humanity's position. He pulled up a display showing human military capacity. The numbers were staggering. Over 2,000 ships now, weapons that made concordance-approved technology look like toys, an industrial base that could sustain war indefinitely. We could continue building. We could create a fleet that would make every other species irrelevant. We have the capacity. We have the knowledge. We survived 10,000 years of warfare. We know things about conflict that most of you have forgotten or never learned. Around the chamber, representatives shifted nervously. But we don't want that, Webb continued. We never wanted that. We wanted to be part of a civilized galaxy. We wanted to trust in laws and justice. We wanted to believe that the concordance would protect us. He let that sink in. You failed us. But we don't want to fail you the same way. So here's our proposal. Universal military restrictions. Every species accepts the same limits. No exemptions. No special treatment for founders or major powers. We'll restrict our military if everyone else restricts theirs equally. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives arguing with each other, with their own delegations, with anyone who would listen. The major powers were outraged. Smaller species were excited. Everyone had an opinion. The Arbiter made a loud chiming sound that meant silence. Ambassador Webb, it said. You know such restrictions would never be accepted by the established powers. Then I guess we won't accept them either, Webb replied. You can't have it both ways. You can't demand we be weak while you remain strong. That's not justice. That's not equality. That's just fear. A representative from a species called the Viridian stood. They were one of the founding members of the Concordance, an ancient and powerful civilization. The young species demands equality, the Viridian said, its voice dripping with contempt. You've been in space for barely a century. We've maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. You think you deserve the same status as us? Webb looked at the Viridian for a long moment. 6 months ago, we would have said no, he finally replied. We would have deferred to your experience, your wisdom, your age. But you know what? Age doesn't mean wisdom. Power doesn't mean justice. You've had millennia to build a fair system and you failed. You let genocide happen because it was politically convenient. So yes, we demand equality. Because we've proven we can take it if you won't give it. The Viridian started to respond, but Webb cut him off. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to vote on our proposal. If it passes, wonderful. We'll all restrict ourselves equally and build a truly fair galaxy. If it fails, humanity will continue building our military. We'll protect ourselves and any other species who wants our protection. And you'll have to live with the fact that the scary young species is now powerful enough to ignore you. He paused. The choice is yours. You can accept us as equals or you can fear us as threats. But you can't dismiss us as irrelevant anymore. Those days are over. Webb left the platform. As he walked back to the human section, he passed the Caldrex representative. The alien looked at him with what might have been respect. You've changed the galaxy, the Caldrex said quietly, whether they admit it or not. You changed us first, Webb replied. We would have been happy staying peaceful, but you taught us that peace is only possible between equals. So we became your equals. The vote took place 3 hours later. The universal restriction proposal failed as expected. Only 15 species voted in favor. The major powers all voted against it, unwilling to limit their own militaries. President Volkov addressed the concordance after the vote results were announced. "We gave you a chance to create a fair system," she said. "You refused. So humanity will continue to maintain a military capable of defending ourselves and our allies. We're not interested in conquest or domination, but we're also not interested in being victims again." She looked directly at the camera, and Webb knew she was speaking not to the concordance, but to every human watching. "We learned a hard lesson these past months. Civilization is valuable, but it's not survival. Justice is important, but it requires strength to enforce. Peace is the goal, but sometimes you have to fight for it." She paused. "We're not going back to who we were before. We can't. 47,000 of our people are dead because we trusted in systems that failed us. We honor their memory by ensuring it never happens again. We remember what we are, survivors, builders, fighters, and we'll never apologize for that again." The transmission ended. The concordance chamber dissolved into chaos. Some species demanded sanctions against humanity. Others quietly approached Webb about defense agreements. A few just sat in shocked silence, trying to process how the galaxy had changed so quickly. Webb returned to his office and found a message waiting. It was from Admiral Chen.